Shalom Aleichem u'bruchim hanimsoin. Today is Erev Shabbos Parshas Zocher, Parshas Tetzaveh, Tovshin Pei-Vav, 2026. I was once sitting by the bedside of the Rosh Hashiva of Mir, Rabbi Finkel, Zichrono Livrocha. And I was sitting there talking to him, and casually talking to him. He was in hospital for a few days. And in walked Reb Ofer Shmulevitz, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, the son of Reb Chaim. He came in with a beaming smile, and he said as follows: Reb Aryeh, you know, there's something called Tshuva Shalema, and there's something called Refuah Shalema. He explained as follows: Tshuva Shalema means you'll never go back to the same Aveira, the same transgression again. You'll be careful. You've completed all aspects of Tshuva, and now you're ready to move on. Refuah Shalema also means that you'll never ever be sick again. And therefore, he said, Rabbi, I wish you Refuah Shalema, the end of all illness, the end of all maladies, end of all sickness. A beautiful comment. I remember Rabbi beamed afterwards, and I was sitting there listening to how they were talking. It was a beautiful expression. I remember as I was going home, I thought to myself, 1 minute, there were more Shalemas as well. There's something called Emunah Shalema also. There's something called Geulah Shalema. And there's Refuah Shalema, and there's Tshuva. There are different Shalemas. The concept of Shalema means finality. In other words, the matter has completed, the matter is finished. I was thinking as follows. In reality, maybe, Refuah Shalema maybe is the only thing which we really put our fingers on, which we can touch. A person is given by the doctors a clean bill of health. That means a Refuah Shalema. But the others may be a little different. Maybe they're all under the guise of something called work in progress. You're working on it. I would suggest as follows. Emunah Shalema, I don't know how many people can claim every one of the 13 principles of the Rambam. Ani ma'amin be'emunah Shalema, sha'bayis hu bayiru mani g'chalad Purim, b'vias haMashiach, tires haMeisim. Go through all the 13 Ani ma'amins. One is completely shlema with all of them. I don't know. I think it's really work in progress in the course of a lifetime. You move on. Shekol ha'Torah, Teras Emes, Moshe Rabbeinu, all the aspects. It's work in progress. Maybe also Tshuva Shalema is also that as well. If a person can turn around and say, for sure, I'm not doing that Aveira again, that transgression again. I've confessed about it. I've left it. I've moved on. I've made a Kabbalah. I've made a Vidui. All the 4 aspects which the Rambam brings down in Hilchos Tshuva. To say that, I mean, I suppose a person can say also, I'm working on it. I hope I've completed my mission. When it comes to Geulah Shalema, although that is really something else entirely, for sure, in order to say we've moved on from every period of exile of Golus, one has to go through maybe the periods of Golus and look at them and see, did I move on from each one? Let's take a quick look in history and see what I mean. Start with Mitzrayim. Egypt was, I suppose you'll say, since Klal Yisrael went from Egypt to Eretz Yisrael, maybe it was a complete Geulah Shalema from Mitzrayim. The meaning here, I think, is as follows. If we would look at all the symptoms and all the scenarios which took place in the first Parsha of Shemos, in Parsha Shemos, you see as follows. They're all a catalyst of situations which moved Klal Yisrael on from Gelus into Golel. They're all private, domestic scenes of tremendous care, of Naiseh b'olam chaber, big care and concern. Ichpatiyut, they would say in Israel. The 2 midwives, Shifra and Pua, who looked after the children where they were born. Take Miriam, the babysitter. No, Miriam looked after her. L'deo ma'yosala, what would happen? Basia came down and she had Rachmanas on Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, all these seems private domestic scenes. Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave his eyes and his heart. He was concerned. He walked the streets of Cairo crying his eyes out, a 12-year-old boy. Meaning, I'm suggesting, moving on from Golus Mitzrayim, I'm suggesting is the care and concern which one has for a fellow Jew. And there we see from that, the next sentence is that Moshe Rabbeinu is at the burning bush and he's sent down to Paro with his first mission to go and speak to Paro. Let's move on from there. Golus Bavel, Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar, I imagine we could say that was something, a tremendous test of bitochen, of trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, Klal Yisrael, Chazal say, sat me'igur Roma lebira amikta, from a very high tower to a deep, deep pit, as follows. The glory and the splendor and the enormous majesty that there was in the first Beis HaMikdash, all the miracles which took place. And then Al Naras Bovel Shom Yashavnu Gam Bachinu, we sat by the rivers of Babylon and there we cried, and Nebuchadnezzar in chains. That an enormous, enormous shock. And therefore, Klal Yisrael, I imagine, had to have bitochen and trust when they were told it would be 70 years, not more. In other words, from all the things which were done wrong, avodah zarah, idol worship, and shedding blood, and also immorality, they moved on from there, perhaps, and the Beis Hamikdash came back. And perhaps you'll say that Bayis Sheni is a tshuva, is a Geulah Shlema from Galus Bavel. Perhaps you'll say that. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Take a look at Galus Yavon. Galus Yavon, the Greek exile, which we went through. I don't know, but you'll probably agree with me that nearly all universities and all secular education, especially in Chutz La'aretz, where we come from, is really all based on the Greek culture. Science, philosophy, sport, drama, architecture, all the different aspects of beauty. It's all really based on Greek culture. Can a person really turn around and say, I'm given up, I've left it all? I remember reading, there was a beautiful comment, I think Rabbi Aaron Kotler had said, in the name of the Chofetz Chaim, only a person who is an Erlich Yid, a refined Jew, is people who capable of seeing the Mashiach. It follows, and he means as follows. If you've left all the mannerisms, the customs, the behavior, the styles of behavior, it doesn't affect you anymore, then you've moved on from Galus Yavon, from the exile of Yavon. Meaning that was the Greek culture, the Hellenism. I don't know. I think maybe it's perhaps still work in progress for many of us. Now let's move on to the theme which we're talking about today. What does it mean, Geulah Shlema from Persia and Media? I suppose you might turn around and say, Iran is still there. No, and maybe let's see what happens this Purim, see what happens. But for sure, we're still under the influence, maybe, of Golis Poras Umadai. But let's look at Purim in that context. Not just Iran of today, but Iran from the time of Shushan and the time of Mordechai and Esther. You might turn around and say that the nature of the exile was that Klal Yisrael had to daven. Remember, Esther wrote to the Sanhedrin and said as follows, Kisvuni l'dayos, write me down for all generations. And Chazal say, what did she mean? Divrei tzolmes v'zakosam, matters of fasting and crying and prayer. And maybe you'll say, moving on from Shushan means that you realize the value of prayer, that it can shift around from lahashmid, la'arog, la'abed, la'yehudim, ha'izah, olav, v'simcha. It's switched completely, v'nafhachu, from the worst possible situation of a potential Holocaust of Klal Yisrael to the happiest day in the calendar. Maybe you'll say that's what it means, all because of the prayer. Maybe you'll turn around and say perhaps that the Golos of exile, the exile of Shushan came about because they went to the banquet, as the Gemara discussed it. Mordechai said, don't go to Achashverosh's banquet. They all went. Many of them went. I think 18,000 went, and they enjoyed themselves, and they caught up in idol worship and also immorality as well. Maybe you'll say it's Emunas Chachomim. I suppose I'm saying as follows. We're really groping to find what exactly is finger on the pulse. What exactly is the nature of the Persian exile that we can turn around and say, from there we move on to a Geulah Shlema. Each of these periods of Golos, from Mitzrayim to Bavel, we have to move on. We have to graduate. We have to proceed so that we can turn around and say, it's final, finale. We're finished. We're finished with exile. And there, Geulah Shlema means I moved on from Egypt, from Babylon, from Greek culture. I moved on, and certainly from our times as well, in the Golos of Edom, which we're going through now. What does it mean, therefore? How can we actually put our finger on the pulse? Rabbi Isai. We had, fortunately in Klal Yisrael, a man who was called a great man, a king called David HaMelech. He was called a maskil. The Vilna Gaon, in the beginning of Mishlei, explains the definition of a maskil means someone who's successfully well thought out, who understands things clearly. V'Hashem imo. Vayhi David l'chol derochav maskil. V'Hashem imo. The words of David HaMelech are primary words. He's focused completely. Maybe that's the reason why, when it comes to davening, especially Psukei de Zimra, we use the words of David HaMelech. David HaMelech is the maskil. His words counted tremendously. There is a chapter in Tehillim, Perek Yud Gimel, chapter 13, where David HaMelech goes through each of the 4 periods of Golos which we mentioned, and he gives a label to them. And perhaps that exactly is the nature of the exile, and from there we can move on to the redemption from each one. It begins, Ad ona Hashem tishkocheni netzach. How long, Hashem, will you forget me forever? Meaning that was the nature of the feeling in Babylon, meaning as if they were complete abandoned, forsaken completely. The nature of Golos Bavel was a feeling of abandonment. Goelos, the exile of Paras Umadai, Persia, was Ad ona tasti es panecha. How long will you hide your face from me? What does this mean, hide your face from me? Golos Paras Umadai, the exile of Persia Media, was one of complete hastoras panim. Hashem is hidden completely. As you know, the name of the Almighty is not mentioned inside the Megillah. It's completely hidden. It's completely secular, and you might just learn it all through as a secular story, as an interesting story of Queen Esther and saving her nation. There's completely something hidden, something behind it all. Ad ono oshis eitzes benafsi refers to Yovan. How long do we have to find eitzes, advice, how to keep Shabbos, how to learn Torah, how to keep Bris Milah, how to observe Rosh Chodesh? This was the goddess of Yovan. They needed eitzes, they needed chokhmah, how to do it. Ad ono yorum oyevi. How long will they last on? How long will Goddess Edom? Nearly 2,000 years we're in exile from there. But let's come back to where we're talking about Goddess Esther, Goddess of Paras U'Madai. It means as follows. The nature of the exile of the exile of Klal Yisrael in Persia and in Persian means as follows: the Hastoras Ponim, Hashem was hidden. You couldn't see what's going on. It was all a matter of a cloak and dagger. What's behind everything going on? Maybe we should define what does it mean by Hastoras Ponim. What does it mean? Something which is the Almighty is there, but He's hidden behind the scenes. There is a magnificent essay written by Rav Dessler. If you'd like to look it up, it's in Nichtav Me'Eliyahu, the first volume, Chelek Aleph, page 177. Rav Dessler explains as follows. There's a difference between Teva, nature, the normal circumstances, and a nes, something which miraculous which happens. In reality, says Rav Dessler, there's really no difference whatsoever. It's a matter of frequency. Something which happens very often we call nature, we call Teva. Something which is infrequent and never happens we would call a nes. That's really the difference behind it. And he gives a beautiful example. Supposing you're standing, I suppose, one day, we should be able to see it. You're standing in Moaz HaMachpelah, where Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the Yemohis are buried there. And all of a sudden the ground begins to shake a little bit, and also the ground opens up, and out comes Avraham Avinu, no? Yitzchak Avinu. You can imagine, it's an unbelievable miracle. You say, goodness me, what happened here? They were buried inside the ground, and they come out from the ground. That's an unbelievable miracle, you would say. That's something called a miracle, how we describe it. Says Rav Dessler, take another example. You take a seed of an apple and put it in the ground, it decomposes and completely rottens, nothing comes out. If you come back 2 or 3 years later, you see a tree in full bloom with apples there. What happened here? Is there any difference, says Dessler, between the grave which opens up and the fruit tree which comes? Both are put in the ground. One is frequent, an apple tree, you expect the apples to come out. When it comes to a grave, you don't expect to see it. And therefore, the definition of a miracle in our understanding is something which is infrequent. There is a beautiful expression of the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish once explained as follows. Teva, nature, is something which Rotzan HaBoyer LaHasmid. The will of the Almighty is that it should continue, it should be regular, it should be frequent. Meaning as follows. In the morning you got up, you managed to get out of bed, you washed yourself, you then spoke to people, you went and davened, you were able to digest your food, you went to work, you spoke to people, you had communication. You couldn't do that when you were 3 or 4 months old, could you? In other words, that's a nes nissa, something which is completely hidden. Something which is completely hidden. It's removed from you. That's the nature of Teva. Teva is you expect it to happen. It's a regular occurrence. You got up this morning, you got out of bed, you woke up. I suppose we could say, all the brachas of Perkechim, I opened my eyes. Kef Kufim, I could stand up straight. Malbish Arumim, I had clothes. Shaloah Sani Goy. These are all nature, Teva. Teva, we could call them. Miracles are something quite different. Miracle is something which doesn't usually happen. Beautiful story. I remember once hearing about the Chazon Ish. He preferred never ever to go out during the day. He lived near an orchard in Bnei Brak, and they say that he was overwhelmed completely by looking at the beauty of nature. He preferred to go out at night because it distracted him so much, listen to birds, watching the nature, watching the sun. It disturbed him, so they say, in his learning, because he was so overwhelmed and amazed at nature. He saw nature really as miraculous straight on, the beautiful description of him. No, that's the way the Chazon Ish was. From there, Rabbi Isai, from this definition and this criticism, this essay of Rav Dessler, maybe we can then move on and make a distinction between something which is natural, Teva, and something which is miraculous. There was a famous Ramban, Nachmanides, at the end of Parshas Boy. Says the Ramban as follows: Min ha-nisim ha-gedolim ha-mufusoim, when the amazing, wonderful miracles like Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah, giving you the mon in the midbar, the Anani HaKavod, or the oil in Chanukah, from these amazing miracles, Odam moider benisim hanistoim. A person makes a certain comparison and says, now I understand hidden miracles. Meaning, from there, that there was the 10 plagues, that there was something cooking. I then understand that the Almighty helped me get out of bed in the morning. I could digest my food. I found a wife. I did business. I spoke to people. From those great wondrous miracles, you have something, a deduction. You come to a certain realization of Nisim Nistoim. The great Mashgiach of Lakewood, Hagon Rav Matisyo Solomon, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, I mean it, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, he was a phenomenal mashgiach. He was like the mashgiach of all of America at the time when he left Gateshead and came to Lakewood. We miss him enormously. But Mashgiach Zecher Tzadik Matisyo said as follows, a beautiful point. What is the meaning of learning Nisim Nistoim from Nisim Giloim, revealed miracles, from learning from then closed miracles? Said by Batisyo, it's something called Hekesh Sichli, an intelligent comparison. You make a Hekesh Sichli means you make an intelligent comparison. Because the Almighty brought the frogs and the plagues and the Orev and Makas Bachos and Mitzrayim, I therefore understand He's also capable of making my shidduch, giving me bread in the morning. I learn from it. A Hekesh Sichli means I make an intelligent comparison. Just like He's capable of doing that, of course He's capable of daily things, of teva, of an apple tree which grows, no? Of everything which happens in the morning. Dogs bark, birds fly, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. These are all teva. Teva I learned from the Nisim Geluim, from the amazing, wonderful miracles. Min ha-Nisim ha-Gedolim ha-Mufusoim, those which are amazing, like Matan Torah, or the creation of the world, or all these wonderful miracles which are very revealed, which are remarkable. You learn about daily hekesh, you make a hekesh sichli, you make an intelligent comparison and come out with a conclusion, but of course HaKadosh Baruch Hu maintain and supervised and monitor those as well. But then the Matisyo went a little bit further, and he then came on to Purim. Purim is completely lifting the veil. It moves on completely from something called a Hekesh Sichli to something which is you actually see the mechanics of the Almighty in front of you, which is much, much more. It's no longer just recognizing that there was the sea divided, or there were 10 plagues, or there's 10, or those Kriyas Yams, whatever these Maisim or Matan Torah. Besides that, there was something much more than that. Inside the miracle of Purim, you actually see the workings, the Hanhoga of the Almighty, how He actually behaves, meaning the nature from one incident to another incident. And when you make that connection from one to the other, you suddenly stand back and say, goodness me, this is what Purim is all about. It's a remarkable miracle here. You see the nature of, it's more than a Hekasif. You actually realize yourself the divine supervision, the Hashgacha Pratis, from one element to another. Let me explain to you what we've been talking about here. I'm going to use the words, it so happened, but you'll understand behind the word so happened is one aspect, one scenario, which led to another scenario. If you can join them all up, I'm going to explain a few points from the Megillah Esther. It so happened as follows. That Achashverosh was the king in a place called Elam, in a place that was the capital of the Persian Empire. But he desperately wanted a throne like King Solomon, and the only place he could find carpenters, so the Vilna Gaon explains, was in Shushan. He moved his kingdom to Shushan, where the carpenters was there. It so happened, B'Shushan Habira Ish Mordechai Haya B'Shushan. Mordechai lived in Shushan, meaning behind the scenes you see Mordechai was living there. You see what happened. It so happened that this particular king also needed tremendous prestige and personality building. He was tremendously lacking. He was originally a stable boy and he rose to become a king. He needed the great support. So he made a magnificent banquet for 180 days. At the end of the banquet, he ordered his wife, who was a very miyucheses, a very dignified, from tremendous lineage, the daughter of Belshazzar, a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, to come and parade in front of everybody. She refused, and therefore he executed her. He was blind drunk, he was in a stupor, and he made the most awful mistake, and he regretted it terribly. He executed his wife. He then needed another wife. It so happened, chosen as a wife was Esther. Esther was probably the best Beis Yaakov girl in the whole of the world. She was unique. The Pasuk explains, she was Yefei Toya V'Fei Mare. The Vilna Gaon, just explain, let me say what Esther was. The Vilna Gaon explains, in physical terms, Yefei Toya means a beautiful ear, beautiful nose, a beautiful hand, a beautiful hair, beautiful eyes, features which are perfectly formed. Yefei Mare means a beautiful overall look, not just individual features, but also overall look. Says the Vilna Gaon, that's a mashal also. The nimshal is as follows. Yefei Torah means every mitzvah performed perfectly. Like in the mashal, perfectly formed limbs, so perfectly formed mitzvahs. That was Esther. She was perfect in all her mitzvahs. Every mitzvah was perfect in its perfection, in its intention, its sincerity, and its devotion to the Almighty. Yefei Mara, says the Vilna Gaon, refers to beautiful midas. Esther was beautiful inside and outside. That's what it means. This great girl, this great lady, was taken to be the wife of the king. And it was a tremendous tragedy in Klal Yisrael. It so happened, after she was queen, and she was taken into the palace, Mordechai was sitting one day, out of great concern to what was happening with Esther. Mordechai was sitting at the gate of the palace, and he went there regularly out of concern, ichpatiyut, to what was happening with Esther. He heard two ministers, Bigsan and Serish, who were talking with each other. They were planning to assassinate the king. They purposely spoke in a foreign language, which no one they thought would understand. But since, as we know, it so happened that Mordechai sat on the Sanhedrin, he knew every single language. He understood what they were saying and told Esther that they planned to assassinate the king. Esther told Achashverosh, and Mordechai saved the life of the king, and it was written down in the book of Chronicles. It so happened it was written down there. So happened that Haman, who had risen to power, who became tremendous because the king recognized his tremendous wisdom in how to deal with the Jewish problem, which Achashverosh was desperate to solve as well. He was no great lover of the Jews. We mentioned this last week, that one was called a mountain and one was called a ditch. The Gemara in Megillah explains. The mountain refers to Haman. You see him from a distance. You see exactly what he was. The ditch refers to Achashverosh. You'd get close, you realize who he was. Haman came forward with an idea of Hashmid to kill all the Jews. One night, the king couldn't sleep. You also can't sleep one night. One night he was terribly disturbed. You also have a night like that. What happened was, Achashverosh wanted someone to read to him. It so happened that he asked for the book of Chronicles to be brought, and he read the page about Mordechai saving his life, and asked who is going to help him, who is going to support, what reward are we going to give to Mordechai? It so happened, Rabbi Yisai, that Haman was outside the room at the moment. He then ordered him to take his arch enemy, a person who he had a vendetta against, to take him on a person through the whole of Shushan. Unbelievable. It so happened. Rabbi Yisai, you see what I'm doing? Every "it so happened" is a theme of Hashgacha Pratis. Everything "it so happened." Esther came in and begged to the king and asked the king if he would come to a banquet, he and Haman. At the final banquet which Esther made, I'm missing a great deal out, but I want you to get the point of what we're talking about here. Esther pleaded for her nation. Nafshi b'shelosi v'ami b'bakoshasi. I'm asking for my nation. Achashverosh didn't know what to do because he was a buddy. He was in partnership with Haman. He went out into the garden and saw that all the beautiful orchids and roses and tulips were all being cut down. He asked the gardeners, who were actually Malachim. It so happened the Malachim were there. They all turned around and said, Haman told us to do it. Haman told you to do it. He was furious. He frowned. He came into the room and saw Haman on top of Esther. He accidentally, it so happened he had fallen on top of Esther, and therefore said, Achashverosh, you're going to take my wife as well? Take him away and kill him. Take him away and kill him. It so happened. Rabbi Yisai, I want to say just one last incident of it so happened. Listen to this beautiful commentary of the Vilna Gaon. It's a wonderful parish here. It so happened in the room was someone called Chavreina. Chavreina was a minister who was standing there. He advised the king what to do with Haman. I want to read out to you the sentence. If you want to look at it, it's Perek Zion, Posuk Tes in the Megillah Esther. I don't have anything wrong with my throat, but I'm going to read you the posuk the way I think the Vilna Gaon means it. My throat is okay. Listen to what I'm saying. Vayomer Chavreina, and Chavreina said, who was he? Echod min hasarisim, one of the ministers of the king. Lifnei hamelech, he said to the king. This is the comment which Chavreina said. He put it in this way. Gam, behold, hinei ha'etz, here is the tree, 50 amas high, asher osai Haman, which Haman had made, lemod asher dibe'em, toid ala melech. The king never heard the words, lemordechai asher diber. He heard as follows, hinei ha'etz asher osai Haman, lemordechai asher diber, in brackets, toiv ala melech, meaning the tree was made for the king, to hang the king on. It's 50 amas high. Take him and hang him. It so happened, says the Vilna Gaon, that this is what Achashverosh heard, that he tried to kill me. This is what he's trying to do. He took my wife and tried to kill me. Take him away and hang him. Rabbi Yisai, what do you do with all these incidents? What do you do with all these incredible peirush of the Vilna Gaon? He never heard the word, L'mordechai asher diber. All he heard is ha'etz toiv ala melech. That's all he heard. The tree is good for the king. You have to put them all together. You have to see from one point to another. From the time Esther was taken, each stage goes in a different stage. But Matisyo, Zecher Tzadik, once explained as follows, a beautiful point. You must join together. Vatilakach Esther lebeis hamelech. Esther was kidnapped and taken to the house of the king. Put that together with Miyadeh Ka'iskas Higata Lamalchus, Mordechai said. Who knows, maybe this is a reason why you came to become the queen for this reason. In the end, Shushan is rejoicing. What happened? We moved from a potential Holocaust to the happiest day in the Jewish calendar. Put them all together. That's the point. Once you put them all together, you see the Hanhoga, the behavior of the Almighty. It's more than Kriyas Yam. Kriyas Yam stuff, you witness something. Matan Torah, which is revealed, the 10 plagues. But here you're actually looking to see the mechanics of the way the punishment works, from one point to the next. If you grasp all these points, you suddenly realize, goodness me, the Simcha of Purim is enormous. It's an enormous Simcha here. From one point to the next, it moves on like that. Rabbi say, I don't have to need a stretch of imagination to take the point a little bit further. Bevadai, of course, we are also living in the time of Hastoras upon him. Look what happened in Klal Yisrael, no? All the sin in the last 80, 90 years, what happened from the time of the Shoah, enormous problems in Klal Yisrael. I remember Vabroba, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, once mentioned in a Vad, I heard him based on also in the Mir Yeshiva, he once explained. He once went to the Chazon Ish and told the Chazon Ish, what's going to be with Klal Yisrael after the war? There seems to be nothing left. The Chazon Ish said, nothing is left. That's how bad it was. The devastation was terrible of what there was in Klal Yisrael. Enormous devastation from the Holocaust. From there we came out, and what happened here? We then move on to a situation of tremendous renaissance. Eretz Yisrael was given to Klal Yisrael. No, and we came and lived here, and the population and the growth of Eretz Yisrael. I came here 40, 50 years ago, and goodness me, look at the difference. The enormous build, the enormous riches, the enormous growth, the stability, the greatness of Klal Yisrael, of Eretz Yisrael, which has grown. The renaissance in Torah is enormous here. The enormous Daf Yomi. The changes are enormous. What's going on here? We'll come on to it a little bit later. But this is the point you have to realize. It's from one stage to another stage. Matisyo explained it in the following way. It's a beautiful moshel, but you'll get the point straight away. The Simcha Purim must be explained like this. Supposing someone is teaching you the letters of the Aleph base. He first of all teaches you the letter Aleph. Then you learn the letter Hey. Then you learn the letter Vov. Then you learn the letter Mem, and then you learn the letter Nun. What do they make up? They're just letters. Aleph, Hey, Vov, Mem, Nun, Hey. Put them all together. Put the letters together. Aleph, Hey, Vov, Mem, Nun. Put the letters together. Juggle with the letters, Rabbi. So what do you come with? You come out with Emunah. No? If you assemble the letters a certain way, you suddenly realize, goodness me, these letters mean my faith in the Almighty. You suddenly see the scene in front of you. From each different scenario in the Megillah, you suddenly realize, goodness me, this is what happened here. From Esther being taken to Big Son. There's the Simcha. The Simcha is from Esther being taken, moments rejoicing. You must see the point. It goes through completely. Therefore, the Simcha of Purim is enormous. Let me explain to you in what capacity it's amazing. Perhaps even more than Pesach, more than that, in the following way. The Rambam, there's a contradiction in the writings of the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Yom Tov, look at that, Perek Vov Halacha Kof, says as follows. When a person eats and drinks and is happy and is Simchas Yom Tov on the Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuos and Sukkos. Lo yimashech b'yayin, don't drink too much wine, u'bisreik, u'bekalos roish. Shekol mi sheyosif, if a person drinks too much, hashikvus v'asreik, harba, and it leads to kalos roish and holos. You must be careful how much you drink. You drink it with v'yisaveh, but not too much. Don't become shikah on Pesach, Shavuos and Sukkot. Be careful how much you drink. You have to be careful. If you open up to the Rambam in the laws of Megillah, Hilchos Megillah, Perek Beis, Halacha Tesvov, listen to the Rambam here. The contradiction here, quite different. How do you make your Suda on Purim? You should eat meat and prepare your Suda. Until you get shikah. You get drunk. What's going on here? How can it be? Shikah is an incredibly awful situation. Shikah is a go, you know. How can you tell me to get shikah, to get drunk on Purim? On Yom Tov, you're not supposed to get drunk. The difference is as follows, rabbis say. We have to really look in the Shulchan Aruch and explain what's going on here. How come by Purim, which is the happiest day, you should get shikha, and yet on Yom Tov you don't? Says the Shulchan Aruch, in Tov Reish Tzadik Hey, in Noach Chaim, Chayev inish levasume. A person is duty bound on Purim, ad shelo yoda, until you don't know the difference between Orul Haman and Baruch Mordechai. Until you cannot tell the difference. You are duty bound, you are obligated to get shikha. You can't tell the difference between an Orul, who was Haman, and a Baruch, who was Mordechai. Let me explain to you a little bit what means here. You have a man who was phenomenally powerful, unbelievably wealthy. He was the second most powerful man in the world. Achashverosh ruled all over the world. Haman and his sons, he had all his sons were presidents, prime ministers. Each one was a dignitary and a profound person in the country where they lived. A phenomenally successful man with all the money and all the gifts and all the prestige that you can possibly need. This was a man who was unbelievably powerful. One day, you were walking through the streets of Shushan. It was a windy day, and you walk through the streets of Shushan. You turn the corner, and there you see, lo and behold, goodness me, how can this be? Here is this man who was phenomenally powerful and successful, swinging in the breeze, and underneath him are his 10 sons. What happened here? What happened here? How can this extremely powerful man be swinging from a tree and his 10 sons? What happened here? That is the definition, says the Vilna Gaon, of an Orul. After all his fame and his wealth and his prestige, he ended up as an Orul, a cursed man hanging on a tree with his sons. Take another individual. There was a Talmid Chacham Gadol Moed, a tzaddik, who was one of the top people in the Sanhedrin, one of the most renowned Talmidei Chachamim in the Sanhedrin, if not the top of all. He heard about the situation of Klal Yisrael. He realized what the desperation was, and he changed his clothing to sackcloth and afish. He took a stool and sat outside the palace of Achashverosh and cried his eyes out and davened. He gathered together thousands of kindlech and davened for Klal Yisrael, and he made a tremendous commotion. And the gatherings were he traveled all around the provinces, telling people, you must daven, you must be concerned. He was unbelievable. He lowered himself completely just for the sake of Klal Yisrael. In the end, he became the position of the first one. He became the Mishnah element. He became number 2, Tcheles Mordechai, tremendous splendor and pride. We mentioned last week that the Talmud brings down that Mordechai HaYehudi, Mordechai, this very powerful, sincere Jew, everybody was terrified of him. Mordechai said something, Mordechai is going somewhere. Everybody was amazed over Mordechai. The Biskarov mentioned, one of the great miracles of Purim also is there was no enmity, there was no revenge afterwards. Mordechai remained pronounced, but even though he was a Jew, there was no anti-Semitism, which is there was no boomerang from Mordechai's tremendous success. That's the point which we must realize. Tremendous miracle happened here. This man became that's the definition of Baruch, says the Vilna Gaon. Baruch means at the end of the day. Now, says the Chofetz Chaim on that halacha of Chayav Inish, before you drink the first cup of wine, make a l'chaim over the following idea. I don't know which is the greater miracle. What Hashem did, that he brought down this tremendous fiend, this Wersha, this evil man Haman, who was so powerful, or he rose up a tzaddik from the ground and made him into such an important person. Which is, make another drink. I'm thinking again. I don't know. Which is the greater name? Which is the greater praise to the Almighty? How much should I thank the Almighty for all that's happened here? I have tremendous hakor satayv. What he did, he saved my nation from the Holocaust to the happiest day of the Jewish calendar. What happened here? Have another l'chaim. Says the Chofetz Chaim, must always have in mind, what is the greater miracle? The fall of the Rasha, the rise of the Tzaddik. I don't know. I can't work it out. I'm thinking. I'm working on it. I can't. It's Bob, and I become almost befuddled. I can't see it clearly. That is the point of becoming shikha. I'm overwhelmed with thanks. Ma'oshiv Lashem Kol Tag Moloyolai. We don't say Hallel on Purim, but you can certainly sing Hallel at the Suda. You have to read the Megillah. We mentioned that last week. The Megillah is the most important. But you sing Hallel. Hoidu Lashem Kito Kili Olam Chasda. I thank you, Hashem, that you saved my nation. And also, besides on a macro scale, on a micro scale, myself as well, all that happened to me in my life. I thank you, HaKadosh. That is the nature of the Simcha on Purim. But you'll turn around, all the bobbies and all the grandmothers, all the wives will turn around. But why do you have to get shikha? It does not mean shikha lying on the ground and you can't talk anymore in a stupor. The Chofetz Chaim says quite clearly, it doesn't go that far. It goes as far as being shikha with thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but much more than Yom Tov. Why is that? What's behind it? I saw a beautiful explanation on this from the writings of Hagon Reb Yaakov Edelstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, the Rav of Ramat HaSharon. He explained as follows. It's a beautiful point. It goes to explain and explain to all these grandmothers and wives who see their husbands or their boys getting shikar on Purim. What's behind it all? What is behind this halacha of getting shikar on Purim? Says Reb Yaakov as follows. Our behavior is usually and should be monitored according to our seichel. I think something out. I think, shall I buy this? Shall I not buy this? Shall I say this? Shall I not say this? Shall I go there? Shall I not go there? Shall I marry this person? Shall I not marry this person? Everything works. There is emotion, of course, but the most predominant factor is your seichel, your rationale. Should I do something or should I not do something? Seichel governs most things, and emotion as well, but seichel should be the guiding line, the lighthouse, for whether you make a decision how you do something or not. Says Rabbi Yaakov, but if you lose your seichel to a certain extent, meaning you drunk too much, what happens is the real person comes out. The panemius, the internal mechanism person, you suddenly realize behind the seichel, you see the person behind it all. I don't know if you've ever seen a Talmid Chacham shikar on Purim. He's standing there crying, Ribono Shel Olam, how much can I thank you? And I'm not a tzaddik. And the confessions he makes and the thanks that he gives to them. The panemius comes out. The real genuine devotion to the Almighty comes out. That's what comes out. You can't do that with your seichel. You need to be a little bit high. You need a certain amount of intoxication. Not complete intoxication to thinking, being Baruch Haman, Baruch Mordechai, I just said Baruch Haman, I don't know, I mix up, I confuse. That level is beyond the role of the seichel, comes to the role of the heart, and the heart comes out. The panemius, nichnas yain yotza soid, the soid comes out of the person from wine. You suddenly realize who he is. That's the reason behind it. And with that you come to tshuva. Remember the beautiful analysis which we mentioned last week of Reb Isaac Sher. Reb Isaac Sher says as follows, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, the Rosh Yeshiva Slobodka. Yom Kippur begins with a banquet. Everybody eats the sudas and mafsekas. And then you end up, the tshuva comes out from the inuim, salicha, mechila, b'chapora. You say al-chet. Purim begins with a fast, Tanis Esther, and ends up with a banquet, the simcha. From the inuim, from the difficulties of Yom Kippur, you come to tshuva. From the simcha and the thanks and the hakoras hatov, the appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bein adam lachaveira, the love between your fellow man, that is the tshuva on Purim. That's the nature. It's a tremendously high level of simcha, but it comes out through the wine, comes out through the intoxication. The real person comes out. It's no longer the rationale, no longer the seichel. It's much more powerful than that. That's what we must understand. Once we get that point clear, we can maybe understand a comment which was made by Hagon Reb Chaim Greineman, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, the nephew of the Chazon Ish. He once made a beautiful point. Modern-day psychiatrists and psychologists say as follows: the greatest problem we have with our generation are drugs. Drugs removes the whole seichel and the rationale of a person. And since a person is under drugs, what happens is he can be immoral, he can kill somebody, he can steal. He does the most horrendous acts because he's under the influence of drugs. So Reb Chaim, that's not true at all. It's nothing to do with that. Because behind all the person is nothing else. He was never ever brought out properly. He was never ever trained. He never ever made a relationship with the Almighty. The problem is there was never any training before. So the real person comes out, the evil inside a person, the natural causes of taiva and gaiva and kavod come out. And that's what happens. With a person doesn't have Torah in him, with the Talmid Chacham, what comes out with the drunk is the panemius, the kedusha behind the person. The real soul comes out. But with the nebuch, a person who's never had Torah inside him, what comes out? Just the worst possible features, the worst profile comes out. That's a beautiful understanding behind it all. And therefore we begin to realize, what does it mean? Simchas Purim is an incredible simcha. Even more maybe, according to the Rambam, more than Pesach, Shavuos and Sukkot, because you even get shikar on it. And for that, the real person comes out. It goes more than one seichel. It goes into the heart. And the soul of the person comes out, and you begin to see, who is this person underneath? He's crying. Why is he crying? Because he does Averos. Why is he crying? He doesn't maybe fulfill the mitzvah of Kibbud Avaleim enough. Maybe he spoke Lashon. Maybe his davening isn't good. This is what he's worried about. The person comes out, and the thanks and appreciation, which he says to, and he sings Hallel with tremendous gusto, tremendous enthusiasm and motivation. That's the point which comes out. Rabbi say, there's a beautiful moshel which is given by Reb Hutner, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. Take this moshel and run with it. It's a beautiful moshel, a parable. Says Reb Hutner, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. What happens if a person, Nebuch, is sick? And after he's sick, he recovers completely. He makes a Sudas Hoydora, a festive meal to celebrate his recovery. the connection between the illness and the Suda which he makes is really, there isn't any connection. He makes the Suda as a representation of thanks for what he went through. But there isn't really any connection. The banquet is a separate entity to the illness that he had. So Rav Hutner, what happens if a person in reality, his illness is depression, more schreura. He's always miserable, he's always sad. He can never smile, he can never laugh, he can never joke. That's an illness he has. Now he recovers from the depression. What happens now? The simcha of the Sudas Haidar is amazing, because it's actually, that is the antidote to the illness that he had. The actual simcha represents what he went through, because that is the nature of it. In other words, the purpose of the simcha is exactly what he went through. He now can laugh, he now can smile, he can now make a joke, his life is happy again. That is what Purim is all about. Purim is, we actually, not just recognizing from afar that it was a miracle, that's a hekesh sichli, an intelligent comparison. It's not that. It's really seeing how the mechanics are, how the tools are, one thing to another, and celebrating Purim is you see it, the actual workings of the Almighty, how he works. That's the important, incredible point behind it all. That's what we're getting at here. Therefore, the simcha of Purim is an incredible simcha. Much more. That's the reason why we get shikha, because you want to bring out the real person, and that's where the tshuva will come out. If that's the case, Rabbi Yisai, it's not hard to make that connection, therefore, to what we're going through now, the Geulah Shlema of Klal Yisrael. What does it mean, the Shlema from Purim? It means as follows, from Golas Podai Umalit, from the Persian Empire. It means as follows. It means the person begins to recognize, in our times as well, from the Shoah, from the enormous difficulty of the Shoah. I remember once reading about the famous Rebbitzin Judith Grunfeld, Aleha Sholem. She once gave a shir and explained as follows. You must imagine in your mind that everything that happened at Auschwitz, at Treblinka and Belsen, all those ashes came out, and that was the reason why there's a Mir Yeshiva, that's the reason why there's a Brisk, why there's a Beis Medrash at Lakewood, why there's a bit in Hebron, all the different, in Philadelphia. The ashes caused this, and someone drew a painting of it. I saw the painting. You see the ashes coming out, and there's the Mir, there's Hebron, there's Ponevezh, there's Philadelphia, there's Lakewood, all the different yeshivas which are around the world. That was the cause. You begin to realize there's something called a cause and effect when you can see that. What rise of Klal Yisrael, as we mentioned previously, the Daf Hayomi, the enormous renaissance in Torah which has taken place, the enormous growth which there is. I remember talking to the manager, I think the Menahel of Lakewood Yeshiva in America, Rav Mordechai Hershkowitz, once turned around to me and said to me as follows. He said, one of the greatest problems we have in Lakewood is nowadays finding room for all the children. There's no room, nothing. I remember when I came to the Mir Yeshiva, there was maybe 500 or 600, now there's only 10,000 people. Now, what happened here? There's a growth. You must go from one to the next, the stages. When we come to the time of the Geulah Shlema, you'll suddenly realize, Hazerim B'dimo, you sowed in tears, and with joy you will reap, you will harvest. That's what happened here. If we're able to realize Purim is a dress rehearsal, a full dress rehearsal of the Geulah Shlema. That's the nature of Purim. We mentioned last week that is the reason why Mordechai was called Doiresh Toiv La'amai, but Doiresh Shalom L'chol Zaro, meaning, what it means as follows: this nature of gutzkeit, of kindness, of understanding, of avas, is the antidote to sinas chinam. That's what it is. What you're seeing from Purim is the rehearsal for what the Geulah Shlema means here. That's what we're taking out of it. The method is as follows, as I said, moving from one point to another. Once you can see that thread coming out, you suddenly realize and stand back. Maybe when the Geulah Shlema will come out, we'll also have to drink Ad Lo Yoda. Maybe that's what we'll be asked to say by the Mashiach. Sing Shoshanas Yaakov. That's what it means. Not Oru Haman, but Oru Kol HaRishoim U'Bruchim Kol HaTalmidei Chacham V'Tzadikim. That's what we'll have to do. When you see the connection going on, that's what we must do. We must learn to see exactly what the Shlema is. Come back to where we began. For Shlema maybe is instant when the person gets recovery. Geulah Shlema is quite different, rabbis. I'm suggesting Geulah Shlema means if you can see and use the plan, the structure of Purim and take it into our times, you suddenly realize Simchas Purim is really a dress rehearsal for the Geulah Shlema b'mheira v'yameinu amen. We should be zeicher to have a freilich in Purim and learn and have simcha and get shikha, not too shikha, but shikha, more shikha, to be able to, that our hearts can come out and the real person should come out with devotion to the Almighty and appreciation. And from there we should see the Geulah Shlema b'mheira v'yameinu amen. We should see the downfall of Iran, also this of Persia, in this Purim Yavo Aleinu L'Tova Emetz Hashem. Bezrat Hashem, my wife and I are planning Bezrat Hashem to be in Lakewood, New Jersey for Pesach. We will be there from Erev Pesach until April the 20th. If you're interested in my coming to a shiur, either in the New York area, Monsey, Passaic, and the outlying area of New York, I would be like to come in, maybe share Divrei Chizuk with you. If you'd like to be in touch with me, my email address is yalpren, YALPREN, RBS, that stands for Ramat Bet Shemesh, RBS @gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I wish you a Freilichen Purim. More than a Hekesh Sichli, Rabbi said, much more than intelligent comparison. You should be able to live Purim. It should be something which our hearts come out, and we should see express the simcha to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ma'oshiv L'Hashem kol tagmuloi halai. Amen. Kein Yehi Ratzon.